Okay, Earth Explorers, we're waiting for the affiliates to sign in. Looks like they're all signed in. Waiting on Foxhole, and we are going live right now. Here we go.
Oh, what's up?
Here we go. Hour one.
Wherever you are, make it team. Truth Frequency Radio.
And greetings, Earth Explorers. Welcome to X Squared Radio. I'm your host, Brooks Agnew, coming to you live from an undisclosed location east of the Appalachian Mountains. This is where the past meets the future. In here, the results are always positive. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. Thank you so much for coming this Sunday before Christmas 2021. I appreciate you so much. You have no idea. Say hello to everybody in the chat room really quick. Yes, already filling up. Lots of people there. Rehab, Not Quite Human, Flawless in USA, Old Dog, Blue Water, Alan Holman, Sarah Thor, 24. Glad to see you guys out there. It's going to be a peaceful week, I think. But then all bets are off. I'll start today with a nice story. It was interesting to read things like this, and I thought I would share it with you. The story goes like this. I bought rocks yesterday. A 10 or 11-year-old girl stood in front of her apartment with a sign, rocks for sale. My first thought was, if she's selling rocks, she must not have much else to sell. I got out of my car, went to ask about her rocks. She said she'd been there for 2 hours, but no one had even stopped. And that was after she had already gone door to door trying to sell the rocks. Her sign said that each rock was $5, so I grabbed the $20 bill and handed it to her. She sheepishly responded that she didn't have change for $20. But I told her change was not needed, as I was going to buy 4 of her beautiful rocks. Immediately, she started to cry. As tears streamed down her face, she told me that her family had a cat, but they didn't have enough money to take care of it. Mom said the only way she could keep it was if she earned enough money. She would be able to keep her favorite pet. She thanked me profusely, but the tears had already rewarded me well. As I left, she packed up her table and treasures and went inside. All day, I thought about the difference $20 had made in her life. I think I'll keep those rocks forever. When I had my brain tumor, even a little text message could give me hope to keep me fighting. No act of kindness is little when you are in need. I wish I could buy rocks every day. Nice story. One night, I like to sing karaoke. I was out. The place was packed. Sang my heart out. Enjoyed myself. And as I was settling up for the night, I noticed that the barmaid, the woman behind the counter, was the wife of the bartender. Just the two of them, serving drinks as fast as they could get them over the counter. There must have been 100 people in there. Everyone was having a good time. Everybody was ordering and keeping them busy. For some reason, I felt just moved. So I left a $20 tip. And as she was putting the receipt in the cash register, she looked up at me and she said, "Oh my God." I said, "What?" She said, "We were just talking about how we were going to pay our light bill and how we needed some good tips tonight to be able to do that. And you just put us over the top. We're going to be able to pay our light bill in the morning." That is listening. That is being observant. That is being generous. That is Christmas. It's always Christmas. You know, I tell you guys at the end of each program to go out and look for the good in people. Help it to grow a little every day. I think sometimes it falls on deaf ears, but then I get an email from somebody. "I like the way you close your show out." And to me, it isn't a show. It's a program. It has been a program for 18 years. We've been here behind this microphone every Sunday, and then we added Wednesdays. And we worked hard on it. Keep bringing you good content, keep expanding to include all these venues. We stream live on audio through Truth Frequency Audio Radio Network, which is where the Truth Freaks hang out, and we're not afraid to let our Truth Freak flag fly. And we also stream live on Foxhole and Twitch and Facebook and DLive and Twitter and YouTube and now Rumble and Rockfin. And we will continue to grow as the platforms grow, because every single day that we have this program, we reach a few more people. We touch a few more lives. And I believe, as you well know if you've listened to this program for a while, that everything we do will eventually affect the universe. And that is for good or for ill. So we don't go through life every day selfish and inconsiderate, and by that I mean not paying attention to the feelings of others or to their shoes or the path that they walk. We don't divide ourselves off from them and say, "Well, you're never going to see me again as long as you live, so I could treat you any way I want. I can have the final word." And it might be biting, or it might be selfish, or it might be judgmental. And I ask you not to do that. I ask you from the bottom of my heart, don't judge people that way. You know, I was working a contract up in Chicago, and there were a couple of brothers. Actually, there were 3 brothers that owned this aluminum die casting company. And they had a lot of employees and had a lot of turnover, and they had a lot of money that they had earned over the years, a lot of hard work, a lot of investing, a lot of chance taking, a lot of sales work, and a lot of getting the job done every single day. So they have breakfast at 7 o'clock in the morning at a local diner before they come into work at 8 to see what's up and how they can lend their leadership to the company and apply whatever pressure it is. Each one of them had a different talent and different meetings, including ones with me. And I befriended one of the owners. I'll call him Dave. And Dave tells me a story that morning. They had been to breakfast, and he made let's just call it a snide comment. You know how people can do, like just talking about us and them kind of comment. And the waitress said to Dave, "You know, that really offends me. I take offense at that, what you just said." And she did it in front of his friends, in front of people that, you know, eat at this rather large table at this diner each morning. So he's telling me this story, and he said, "You know, she embarrassed me." So As soon as we get done here in this meeting, I'm going back to that diner. I'm going to get that girl fired. And I said, but Dave, you have an airplane. He said, what? I said, Dave, you own an airplane and a helicopter too. She's a waitress. She works for a little over $2 an hour plus tips, but she's human. And what you said offended her. So you're going to go back and cost her a job and maybe cost her a payment or two or a meal or two. And what will that get you? You have an airplane. So he didn't go back. In fact, the next morning, the same waitress was there. He pulled her aside and he apologized. That's big. That's big for Dave. But that's how you affect the universe. Every day. Every day. It doesn't matter who it is, whether it's your boss or a coworker or a cop. You can leave these good things along the way. And they all affect the universe forever. The ripples go beyond time and eternity. So that's my opening message. I have more of a Christmas story later if you hang around. I think we might let YouTube hang around a little while because we have some important things to talk about. YouTube, as you know, is part of Google, and Google routinely violates our civil rights here, so we don't usually let them stay through the whole program. But this is the end of the year, and so maybe something will sit out there. And I appreciate all my YouTube followers out there, green hearts out there, and all my D-Live followers, channel changers out there, not quite so human, and Mark Hovsepian, Baba Susie. Thank you so much. This whole year has been just marvelous because of you. Thank you. Sometimes you sit behind this microphone and your feelings get tender. It's okay. It's okay. We'll get through it. So let's talk a little bit about Ukraine because tomorrow is the shortest day of the year. It is the winter solstice. Lots of things are happening. Planets are in a peculiar place for the next 2 or 3 days. The length of the day, the difference between day and night is exactly equal tomorrow, and you're not going to notice much difference for about 2 or 3 days. And there are auspicious things that happen during this time. Some of them good, some of them very bad. But Ukraine is an interesting theater right now. You know, the vast majority of the U.S. population, they don't care about Ukraine. Never been there, never thought about it. They hear the word every now and then. And most Americans simply just don't care about Ukraine. Russia's military preparations for war or pretty much anything else that's happening on the other side of the globe. But over in Russia, things are completely different. They are. There's constant talk about the potential for war, not with Ukraine, but with NATO. They call it the West. It isn't really the West. It's the global syndicate and their army that they have been building up out of multi-nations, taxing all the nations as one and forming this incredible single entity that rules over different peoples, different for millennia. There's constant pessimism. It's going to be difficult to avoid because they know the global syndicate never, ever surrenders. They can be beaten. They can lose battles. They can be positioned. They can sanction Russia. Russia can turn around and say, well, fine, no problem. We'll just sell our oil and gas someplace else. You can smash our ruble. We don't care because we have our own bank. We have our own system. You can't break us. And to the Russians, this is the really big crisis for this Christmas. I mean, since the Cuban Missile Crisis in the 1960s, it's just been this way. in the late 80s, the wall fell and Germany reunified and the Soviet Union fell and all the individual states, Latvian, Estonian, Serbian, they all became independent states, Kazakhstan, and they all accessed the New York capital markets, and they raised money to start their nations. I understand Twitch is glitching a little bit. That's what happens when we get a whole bunch of people watching on one venue. So you could switch over to DLive, you could switch over to Rumble, you could switch over to Rockfin, ROKFIN, which reminds me, I forgot to hit the go live button. Hang on one second. There we go. Now we're live on Rockfin. See, we weren't live, but now we're live. Not live. Not live. Okay. So now we are live on Rockfin. Hopefully the stream key is going through. Can't see it up yet, but we'll be able to see it any moment. Anyway, I know Rumble's up. I'm learning. These new platforms have their own little idiosyncrasies. So, the Russians have been repeatedly warned on all media, this blanketing every station that will pick it up in their country, that Western missiles are being moved closer to the border of Ukraine. And the Russians have warned the West, don't move those missiles closer. Above all, don't put those missiles in Ukraine. And they've repeatedly warned that Ukraine must not become a member of NATO, because Ukraine has been part of Russia since the year 1760. That's a long, long time, longer than we've been around. There are Russian people that live in Ukraine. They speak Russian. They have Russian families. They have Russian in-laws. And they're using this same rationale. We don't want the Russians to have missiles in Cuba that could potentially hit our major cities, right? We didn't, so we warned them and they stayed back. The only way that Vladimir Putin will ever authorize an invasion of Ukraine is if one of his strategic red lines is crossed. And he made it clear to Virtual Joe in that meeting where he spanked that rash severely. I mean, I don't even know what Joe Biden said. I don't even think he remembers what he said. But instead of easing tensions and trying to talk things out, just keeps provoking Russia, just keeps poking him, just keeps saying, "Oh, you're being aggressive. You can't go into Ukraine. You can't build up on the northern side of Ukraine, or we're going to move our forces closer." And Putin keeps saying, "The reason I'm moving closer is because you're moving closer. You move back, and I'll move back." And if they keep on recklessly poking the bear has very long teeth, and he has very strong arms. And at some point, I can guarantee you, a mistake will be made. And we're going to have a war nobody wants, because once it starts, it's not like, "Oh, hey, sorry, my bad. Those 25,000 people, we didn't mean it." It's not going to be that way. So there are 7 signs that war with Russia just got closer. I'm telling you this so you can apply your consciousness and ease these things, especially if you have relatives in Europe, and some of us do. Number 1, despite the fact that Vladimir Putin has said that such a move would cross one of his red lines, Ukraine was officially just told that it will eventually be allowed to join NATO. Facing a building threat, Russia's going to respond. They're not going to allow that. Most of the people that live and work in northern Ukraine are Russian, as are the Crimeans who voted to be annexed to Russia 5 years ago. Yeah, there was no invasion. Crimea was fearful of a NATO incursion and being enslaved by the EU banks, so they voted to be annexed. You can't blame them. And they can travel freely by ferry to Russia with no visa, just back and forth to shop. and celebrate Christmas with their Russian cousins. NATO moving into Ukraine is an act of aggression, and they are wrong. And it will be smashed by the Russians the day it occurs, or the night. Russia will turn off the EU's gas, and worse. And number 2, Ukraine has shocked the world by opening up bomb shelters. In Kiev, by the way, in Kiev. Ukraine has opened bomb shelters in the capital of the nation as fears of a Russian invasion soar. Because once the weapons start firing back and forth, you know who's caught in the crossfire. It's the people. It's the people of Ukraine. Number 3, good old ABC's Martha Raddatz. She's reporting that after Virtual Joe's recent video call with Vladimir Putin, the Russians moved an additional 10,000 troops to the border with Ukraine. You know why? Because Putin doesn't bluff. Because he told Joe, you either back off or I'm going to occupy the southern border of Ukraine and you shall not pass. And if you think you're going to step in and defend Ukraine, you're going to get some of it too. It scared the hell out of Virtual Joe, let me tell you. Here's what he said. At this point in time, Russia is choosing an aggressive posture vis-a-vis its neighbors. This is what she said. And as the European Union and its G7 partners have made very clear, further aggression acts against Ukraine will have massive costs for Russia, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Wednesday. See, it's all backwards. It's all backwards. It's like pushing somebody in a fight. If you take a swing at me, I am going to shoot you dead. And they keep pushing and pushing and kicking and slapping and spitting in your face and calling you names. Number 5. Banks in Belarus are preparing to switch to Russian version of SWIFT due to imminent sanctions by the West. Now, you don't know what SWIFT is. I will explain to you. SWIFT is the way international money is wired from one country to another. The Bank of International Settlements, the BIS, uses the SWIFT system. It is a direct connection to the West and the financial markets. Or not the financial markets, but the financial mechanism for settling transactions. Russia has its own version of SWIFT because it doesn't belong to the central bank. You notice I said G7 and not G8. It's because the 8 is Russia, and they're not invited. So Belarusian banks are preparing for tougher Western sanctions by signing up to Russia's alternative to the SWIFT, the international financial messaging network that underpins the global banking system. Russia is not part of the global banking system, and this is actually the underlying cause of the tension between the EU and Russia. Russia controls the flow of energy in the form of natural gas to Europe. However, they're not part of the banking system. So that means that the EU has to pay with real money. Yeah, they have to pay with real money. They can't just, print money and move it through the system like they would if you were part of the system. Russia's system for transfer financial messages, which is called SPFS, it has more than 400 domestic users, practically every licensed Russian tender, but is used by only 38 banks from 9 other countries. Developed in 2014, the SPFS is designed to keep banking transactions in the event of Western sanctions disconnecting Russia from SWIFT. That's one of the sanctions, by the way. Russia will not be able to buy, sell, or trade because we will prevent them from moving money. So Russia built its own money transfer system, and it works. Number 6, it's being reported that Russia has begun to move TOR, these are short-range surface-to-air missile systems, to the border area with Ukraine. Now, they're not moving them into Ukraine. They're just making sure no airplanes fly from Ukraine into Russia, just in case Ukraine is forced to give permission to NATO jets flying over Ukrainian territory. And number 7, a bipartisan group of U.S. senators, by the way, Johns, McCain, and Kerry were U.S. senators. They were responsible, along with Victoria Nuland, they were responsible for the massacre of Ukrainians in the streets and the pushing Yanukovych into exile and pulling a war criminal, well, not a war criminal, but a financial criminal out of prison and putting them back in leadership over Ukraine, somebody that was EU-friendly. Yanukovych was sort of everybody's friend until the EU tried to spring a debt trap on Ukraine, and Vladimir Putin stepped in at the last minute and said, don't sign that. I will loan you the money, and I will give you discounted gas to get through the winter. So Yanukovych said, fine, no problem. So he signed with Putin instead of NATO, and Johns, McCain, and Kerry went in and fomented a riot, burned Kiev to the ground, and that's why we have the tensions that we do. So when you say a bipartisan group of U.S. senators, it don't mean shit. They want to formally designate Russia as a terrorist state. Really? Really? Needless to say, Russians are not happy about this. In fact, a lot of Americans are not happy about this. Russia's not a terrorist state. And on top of that, as if that wasn't absolutely incredible, the U.S. senators want to designate Russia a terrorist state as if its forces further invade Ukraine. And such a designation of a nuclear superpower, one of the most powerful presences in space. Quick break at TFR. We'll be right back after this. Don't go away.
Attitude about society, unique understanding about other human beings and what makes a good life, what constitutes a good life, how you feel about each other. I've got a good phrase for you. You can't succeed by yourself. So to have a unique, refined sense of appreciation for each other is prerequisite. It takes each other to build a society. It takes all of us to build a country, to build a nation. It takes all of us to build a community. Key phrase, you can't succeed by yourself. It takes all of us to make any one of us successful. And a unique, refined appreciation of the all of us is what makes the I of us do much better. That appreciation of society. It takes all of us to make a market. We need each other's ideas and inspiration. And once you have that sense of appreciation of the all of us, now you and your place and your possibilities and your opportunities now start to really soar when you understand how important it is within the framework of the all of us. So you can't succeed by yourself. It's hard to find a rich hermit.
The reviews for Extendivite are amazing. Here are some from Amazon. September 2018. Extendivite works in keeping my blood pressure in the normal range. I've been using Extendivite for many years now. May 2018. Great product. I use regularly and I rarely get sick. March 2018. This product has relieved what appeared to be angina pain in my chest and shortness of breath after climbing stairs. I'm quite happy about it. February 2018. My husband, son, and I have been using this product for a few months now, and we have noticed an improvement in our joints and blood pressure. Tell us your story. Get Extendivite today. To order, call 1-877-928-8822. That's 1-877-928-8822 or visit heartdrop.com.
Extend your life with Extendivite.
Hey everyone, it's Mark Sargent from Strange World. Broadcasting live every Tuesday evening, 10 to 12 Eastern, 7 to 9 Pacific, right here on True Frequency Radio. Strange World covers a wide range of topics, from enclosed world theory to lunar waves to the end of the world in film. It's basically doomsday with a silver lining. With the audience as my co-host, we take an optimistic approach to all things conspiracy and promote confidence, hope, and humor whenever possible. If there's a topic you want us to cover or a guest you would like to see interviewed, please email me at msargent23@comcast.net. So please join me and tell your friends about Truth Frequency Radio, the leader in real radio programming, bringing you quality, cutting-edge broadcasts from around the world.
Okay, let's get back to it.
You are listening to the Truth Frequency Radio Network.
No hate, no hype, no fear.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for being part of the program tonight. I want to finish off this section about Ukraine because it's important. You're going to hear about it in the next few days. I hope that this game of one-upmanship will be put to bed for another year. There are some positive things that are happening in exile that may put some pressure on this not happening as well. Aloha to you, Kenneth. Nice to see you out there in Hawaii. So anyway, most Americans don't realize this, but Russia and China have just announced a brand new security alliance. Now, I don't know all the details of this alliance. I don't know if anybody does, or if they're going to say anything about it. And it could be part of the posturing. And thanks so much for the good news, by the way, on the reports. I'll explain more about that after we let YouTube go. If we're going to talk about that, we'll do it in the next segment. Then we'll have to let YouTube go because we have to censor them on this. Anyway, the infamous President Xi said regarding this deal, and I quote, "At present, certain international forces under the guise of democracy and human rights are interfering in the internal affairs of China and Russia and brutally trampling on international law and recognized norms of international relations," close quote. So, Virtual Joe is finding himself on the opposite side militarily from Russia and China. I don't know if that's going to happen because you know and I know that President Xi and his organization controls the more intimate parts of Virtual Joe and his son Hunter. And, as I will report later on tonight, several Democrat congressmen. Oh yeah, the heat's really turning up on that, let me tell you. It's going to boil over into the public. I'm going to give you a brief on it tonight, but you're going to hear much more about it after Christmas, about this Chinese money and how it's influenced lawmaking in the U.S. So the Virtual Joe and his gang of criminals cannot get on the opposite side of China. If China is saying you will not get involved in Ukraine, guess what Virtual Joe's going to do after he changes his diapers? He's not going to get involved in Ukraine. And that's exactly the rhetoric that he has been saying the last few days. Hey, technically speaking, Ukraine's not really part of NATO, so we really can't go in and defend them against Russia. And, I'm just saying, these are all backdoors. These are all backdoors that allow the old two-step in D.C. So Ukraine's kind of caught in the middle. So those people that are out there thinking, oh, are we going to find ourselves fighting both Russia and China at the same time? The answer is no. I know the analysts are saying it could happen, but think about it. Use your head a little bit. All those satellites, all the manpower that's in the International Space Station, how did they get there if it wasn't for Elon Musk? Russians. How did we have a space program for the last 25 years? Russia. You see, we have a lot more in common with a nationalist Russia than we do with a fascist global syndicate, which is now running the European Union. Meanwhile, European powers, I don't even want to call them European powers because they really aren't. I mean, if you get right down to it, there's something on the map called Europe, but it isn't really Europe, not yet. Not enough generations have gone by. They're still Germans. They're still French. They're still Polish, right? They're still Austrians and Romanians. There's no Europe. There's no one voice. There's no one language. So right now there's one currency officially, but that doesn't mean there's one thought process. There's no European nation that can stand against Russia. Can't happen. They will be splintered apart and run like cockroaches as soon as the real weaponry starts flying. Iran's continued nuclear escalation is also a big problem. Who do you think is feeding them the technology? Well, it's Russians, yes. It's Chinese, yes. Why? Because Iran is a terrorist nation. Iran is not afraid to use terrorist weapons, and they do all the time. So Iran's kind of the loose pit bull of that region. So, and you know, they're rapidly reaching the end of the road, I think. You know, they're nearing the point where Iran's escalation of its nuclear program is going to be completely hollowed out by the world. They're not going to be able to get away with it. It's going to turn violent, but at least it's not going to be globally violent. And the Israelis have already been practicing for an attack on Iran, and Iran will last about an afternoon. If peace talks collapse, which it looks like they might because people are pulling their diplomats or threatening diplomats, or diplomats are talking with what I call spiral energy. They don't actually come to agreements. They just kick the can down the highway. Of course, a new war in the Middle East would give the Biden administration a way to distract us from our growing internal troubles. That might help a little bit in the polls, but I mean, only 26% of the country believe we're headed in the right place anyway, so any direction is up, right? Any direction is up. And another poll shows 75% of Americans are either unsure or believe the country is headed in the wrong direction. That's a mighty change since 16 months ago. 16 months ago, everyone was very, very positive. And just 4% believe the economy is excellent. I don't know what 4% it could possibly be, unless there are people that are just making a ton of money online and they don't want anything to upset the apple cart. Personally, I don't think we're going to see a major war erupt this Christmas. There might be a skirmish, there might be a test of wills, there might be a little tiny bit of a Bay of Pigs kind of thing, but I don't think so. I don't think so, because Ukraine is the middle ground, okay? It's kind of like the demilitarized zone. And the thing about Ukraine is it isn't a single country per se. It's made of three different ideologies. You have Russian communists there. You have Ukrainian oligarchs. These are the wealthy powers that came out of World War II with a tremendous amount of wealth. These were part of the industrialists that made their money on the war. They were into steel and coal and tin and gold. They had utilities, and they're wealthy, and they're privately owned. They have their own private armies. They like things the way they are, and they don't want Russians coming in and nationalizing everything, and they don't want communism to take over. They're Russian oligarchs. They're not nationalists. They're more like warlords. They're more like warlords, and they have their territories. And then you have a third faction, which is made up of NATO-sponsored fighters. And a lot of these are Al-Qaeda. Yeah, Al-Qaeda. They're professionals. They're paid. They come in. They're good fighters. They don't need much but money. And they're stirring things up. And these guys, the guys that come in from NATO, they're the ones with the SS on their shoulders, okay? It looks like the old SS patch. They're Nazis. They're Nazis. And all three of these factions are fighting for power. Well, let me put that another way. They're fighting for their own existence. The Russian communists are peaceful people. They're hardworking people. I have acquaintances that are involved in that, and they give me the story from on the ground, tell me what's going on. They have small arms at best, rifles, pistols, but they got people, lots of them too, and tough people. And they're the worker class. And then you have the oligarchs. They have heavy guns. They have 20 millimeters. They have tanks. They have hardware, and they can fight. And then you have NATO and their professional mercenaries, the Al-Qaeda and other fighters like that, the SS, the Nazis, that are also in there. So they don't have heavy weapons, but they have, 30 caliber, 50 caliber kind of stuff. It could get nasty, and it could get nasty in a hurry, but right now it's kind of at a stalemate inside of Ukraine. There are skirmishes, there are things that blow up every now and then, but we're not talking about fighting block by block and mountain by mountain. If NATO comes in, it is going to be seen as a strategy to put weaponry hours closer, minutes closer to Moscow. They don't care really about Ukraine. What they care about is the high ground. They want to get in those mountains. They want to get so that they can have an offensive threat in Ukraine close enough to Russia that Russia would have a much more difficult time defending itself against it. Right now, you have to fire over Ukraine to get to Russia, and that gives them some time. It gives them a buffer zone. It's kind of like when Israel won the Six-Day War. They didn't just end at the border. They pushed the Arab nations back. They pushed them all the way back to the Golan Heights, the high ground, because it made it much more difficult for Arab sympathizers and Israel haters to lob low-power rockets into the city that they could see from the mountains. So they pushed them back to the other side to make it kind of a blind shoot and give themselves a buffer zone. So they took property. They won property during the war, and they still own it. That's why they call it an occupation. Sorry, that's what happens at the end of wars. You lose, they win. They don't want NATO to move anything into Ukraine. They don't want NATO to move anything into Poland, and Poland doesn't want NATO to move anything in there. Turkey has nuclear weapons, but it's all the way over on the other side of the Black Sea, and there are defenses in the Black Sea that could probably help defend them. So you're going to hear in the news how tensions might be rising over there for some kind of conflict. Everything that's being put into place is sort of like football strategy, I suppose. The best defense is a good offense, right? Put the scoring forces in place, and your defense is going to be tied up trying to deal with that. All of your energy is going to be tied up trying to deal with that. And so that's what Russia's doing. Instead of putting up good defenses, which they are, of course, 175,000 troops and hardware and machines and everything on the northern border of Ukraine, and they're doing exercises all the time over there, so the oligarchs can see them doing it, but some of it is actually coordinated with their Russian counterpart in Ukraine. So these are not what you think they are, not what the news media is trying to convince you that they are. So I think that these tensions are going to back down simply because the U.S. is not going to have a dog in the fight, because Virtual Joe is not going to want to get involved. He does not have a tactical mind. He barely has a strategic mind. And the General Corps is not going to back him up. The General Corps is not going to back him up. All those people that lied during the impeachment trials or impeachment hearings that Shift for Brains was having, they hate Russia. They can't stand Russia. They want to go to war with Russia. They're pro-Ukrainian. So I'm just telling you that you're not getting the full story. So that's why you tune in here, so that you can get those pieces and keep yourself clear of those kinds of thoughts. But a while back, it was during the Trump administration, President Donald Trump backed out of what was called the Open Skies Treaty with Russia. So yesterday, Russia's foreign ministry issued a statement declaring that it has formally ceased participation in the Treaty of Open Skies as well. So without the U.S. in it and without Russia in it, it really doesn't mean anything, right? The Kremlin says that without America in the treaty, there's little reason to continue Russian participation, despite the more than 24 other participating nations. It's like, doesn't really matter because they're just small kids on the block. We respect the decision of the participating states remaining in the treaty to continue its implementation. We wish them constructive and fruitful collaboration. That's what the formal statement said. However, it is obvious that without the participation of the U.S. and Russia, the treaty isn't worth the paper it's written on. Okay? Open Skies is tenuous at best. Okay? The area of application is going to drop by, 75-80%. And the number of Open Skies missions planned for 2022 are going to severely decrease. Now, it was initiated in 1992, okay? And it was perpetuated under the Clinton administration. And it was then ratified in 2002. It allowed the 35 member states that eventually joined it to conduct what we would call short notice runs over the other person's country. Short notice, unarmed observation flights. Hey, we're checking on you and you can check on us. And, it was the Open Skies Treaty so that you could fly reconnaissance aircraft over each other's countries. Russia said that nearly 450 reconnaissance flights were allowed over its territory since the treaty was initiated 30 years ago. We don't shoot down reconnaissance jets or planes anymore. The treaty even allowed Russian recon flights over Washington, D.C., for instance. And in past years, Russian Tupolev Tu-154s have even flown at low altitude over such sensitive areas as, how about Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland? That's near the capital. The Pentagon, CIA headquarters in Langley. And starting in May of 2020, when Trump first announced the U.S. intention to withdraw, U.S. officials previously said of Open Skies that the U.S. essentially isn't getting anything out of it. We're exposing ourselves, but we're not getting anything out of it. We're not seeing anything, but you're seeing everything. And that was why Trump backed out of it. Moscow is now throwing up its hands, saying that without American participation, it too really gets nothing out of it. Now, you could say that the Open Skies were fruitful. I don't know that they were. I mean, it was sort of like, hey, they're coming. Like when you used to play ball in the streets, kickball or football or frisbee or whatever. Somebody would holler, car, and then you stop the game. Everybody moves out of the way. The car goes through. And then the game continues, right? That way nobody gets hit. Well, that's kind of like what it is with Open Skies. Here comes the reconnaissance plane. Everyone knows that it's coming. And so they throw the tarps over everything. They cover up the submarine propellers that are in port and all that stuff. And you get used to it. So, yes, they're blaming the collapse of it on kind of Cold War era, confidence building. But, the Cold War has been warming up for a while. Since the second year of the Obama administration, the Cold War has been getting warmer and warmer, with the building up of ISIS by Hillary Clinton's State Department and the arming of it and providing an intel by the Obama administration. ISIS was able to get huge and take over a significant portion of the Middle East all the way up to Turkey. And nobody liked it. Nobody liked it. So there was a very big lack of trust there from everybody, Syria and Turkey. Anyway, for responsibility of the degradation of the agreement, it lies at the feet of, I think, President Trump. He's the guy that took the treaty apart. He's the guy that said, look, let's consider that you're going to hide stuff, we're going to hide stuff, and if we can find out what you're hiding, good for us, and if you can find out what we're hiding, good for you, but we're going to be nationalists here. We're not imperialists. We're not trying to take over your country. We just don't want you to take us over. So those are the tensions that are up to the minute right now where they are. I trust that we will go through Christmas peacefully, but the tensions are there. And what we have to consider here when we think about these global forces, playing with knives, is that we're sitting in between all of this action, and we're the ones that really would lose if action did happen. And you have to make a consideration if it's good for the leaders to make this happen. Now, in the old days, I say the old days, in the days of the Clinton crime syndicate, as they came out of Arkansas, they came with so much baggage, so many dead people, so many women shot in the back of the head and left to die in the woods, so many lawyers shot in the head and rolled into Marcy Park, and just so much baggage, and selling U.S. secrets for money, and Chinese infiltration into the administration, the Muslim Brotherhood coming into the administration. It was rough. There was a lot of mistrust, a lot of ground lost when these ballistic secrets were shared with China in exchange for money and for artificial intelligence help to get the Democrats into power and keep them in power. You saw the results of that in the 2020 election. Big time, big time. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that when we get into the individual congressmen that are being called out for accepting Chinese money in order to get elected and to maintain their election. And, we've talked about ballots are us and all of that, and we may touch on that tonight too. But the point I'm trying to make is that these tensions have been a long time coming, and Russia is not the aggressor here. Russia is the defender. NATO is the aggressor. Russia does not care at all about invading Europe. They don't care. They're selling Europe gas, and they're counting the money. It's a business relationship. What they don't want to see is the EU, when they run out of money, and they're going to, because all socialist organizations do run out of money, when they run out of money, they're going to want to conquer another country in order to grab their money. And they're especially going to go after the countries that are not already in debt to them, because they have a ton of assets. Russia has a lot of assets. Don't you think it just burns their ass that they got to pay for that Russian gas? They don't want to. They want it for free. And the only way, well, in times past, what they have done is they've loaned money to those countries and put them in a debt trap so they could get the gas for free. I mean, Britain did that for 1,000 years. And they have a bunch of good teachers. So I think right now we have a stalemate, especially if the U.S. decides to stay out of the fight. I don't think NATO is going to take on Russia by itself. It cannot win. It simply cannot win. All right, let's talk a little bit about science, because we have, let's see how much time we got in this segment. Oh, we only have 2 minutes. So let's talk a little about walking on the sun. In an incredible first, a human-made spacecraft has swooped in and made contact with the sun. Yeah. The 20th of April, the Parker Solar Probe went up. We talked about it here on this program. And actually flew into and through the solar corona, the upper atmosphere of the sun. And not only did it live to tell the tale, proving the effectiveness and the construction of Parker's high-tech heat shielding, but it took measurements while it was there and gave us a wealth of never-before-seen data on the heart of our solar system. The Parker Solar Probe touching the sun is a monumental moment for solar science and a truly remarkable feat. That's what astrophysicist Thomas Zurbuchen, Associate Administrator for the Science Mission Directorate at NASA headquarters, said. Not only does this milestone provide us with deeper insights into our sun's evolution and its impact on our solar system, but everything we learn about our own star teaches us more about the stars in the rest of the universe. Parker Solar Probe launched in 2018 with its primary objective to probe the solar corona. In its nearly 5 hours inside the solar atmosphere, Parker measured fluctuations in the sun's magnetic field and its sampled particles. Previously, the estimates of these properties relied on, remote and distance measurements. When we fly that close to the sun, we get a lot more information. We see evidence of being in the corona in a magnetic field, solar wind data, visually in images, and we can actually see the spacecraft flying through the corona, structures that can be observed during a total solar eclipse. Yeah, it's very cool. Very cool pictures. Quick break with the Truth Frequency Radio Network. We'll take a quick 3-minute break here, listen to a little news, give the voice a little rest, and we'll be right back after this. Don't go away.
Censorship and regulation is becoming an ever-growing problem in today's modern media. From the mainstream to YouTube and Google, the information you're looking for is buried by official narratives and propaganda. This is why TFR is 100% uncensored, unregulated, and listener-supported. The shows on TFR are not micromanaged by the station, and our hosts are free to speak their minds however they please. As such, the views and opinions expressed on our station are of those who make them. If you happen to hear anything offensive on TFR, please send us an email to toughtitty@tfrlive.com, and we'll be happy to tell you that we really don't give a damn. We stand for freedom of speech and non-censorship. If you also stand for free speech, you can go to tfrlive.com/signup and sign up for a TFR supporter pass and help us in our mission to keep the airwaves uncensored and unregulated. TFR Live, your uncensored and unregulated protection.
I'm looking at the crowd here and the tens of thousands, probably 100,000 plus people here. And you did it all without burning down buildings? Without looting? I didn't know that that was possible. No shit. According to the media,
these explosions are bullshit.
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 When you have a large gathering of peaceful protesters, they're supposed to burn it all down.
These explosions are bullshit.
Boom. Who could have seen that coming?
Boom. These explosions are bullshit.
No shit.
Let's have trial by combat.
This fight has only just begun.
Keep fighting.
Let justice be done.
We're gonna walk down and I'll be there with you.
Get up.
The best is yet to come. When you catch somebody in the fraud, you're allowed to go by very different rules. It's so egregious, it's so bad, so base that people don't even believe it. It can't be true.
That's why my father sends a tweet. Paid
streets descend on Washington, D.C. A man and a woman. No shit. Boom. According to the media, these explosions are bullshit. 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 Boom. When you have a large gathering of peaceful protesters, they're supposed to burn it all down. Boom. These explosions are bullshit. Boom. Who could have seen that coming? Boom. 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 These explosions are bullshit. No shit. Let's have trial by combat. We're gathered together in the heart of our nation's capital to save our democracy. What? And Mike is just gonna have to come through for us. If he doesn't, that will be a sad day for our country.
Who hides evidence? Criminals hide evidence.
I had no idea. Who could have seen that coming?
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness.
So let every adversary against democracy, against liberty, be overturned right now.
So we're going to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue.
No shit.
Boom.
According to the media,
These explosions are bullshit.
bullshit.
Bullshit. Boom.
When you have a large gathering of peaceful protesters, they're supposed to burn.
This is the Truth Frequency Radio Network. TFR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
All right. Second hour. Wow, we're already blown through 1 hour. Hey, Wrecking Ball, I cannot talk about that right now because YouTube is still with us, okay? So when we censor YouTube, because as you know, Google routinely violates our free speech rights here, then we'll talk about that. But I can't talk about that subject right now. That is verboten from the overlords. It turns out the sun doesn't have a solid surface. Instead, its boundary is defined by what we call the Alfvén critical surface, where gravity and the sun's magnetic fields are too weak to contain the solar plasma. Above this point, the solar wind emerges, blowing powerfully through the solar system, so fast that the waves within the wind break away from the sun. We call the surface of the sun composed of a roiling convection cells of plasma, and known as the photosphere, is far below. One of the goals of the Parker probe was to find out more about this critical surface, namely where it is and what its topography is like. Since we don't know either of those things, estimates had put the Alfvén critical surface at somewhere between 10 and 20 solar radii from the center of the sun. Parker entered the corona at 19.7 solar radii, dipping down to as low as 18.4 solar radii during its coronal jaunt. Interestingly, the probe seemed to encounter the magnetic conditions of the corona sporadically, which is what I would expect, suggesting that the surface is very wrinkled. And at lower depths, Parker encountered a magnetic structure known as a pseudo-streamer, which we can see arcing out from the sun during solar eclipses. Parker's data suggests that these structures are responsible for the deformation of the critical surface, although we don't currently know why. So lots more information coming out from that, and we're going to keep you posted on that as more information comes. Now, the other great space story, which is this week, I'm very excited about it because this is a long time building, very, very painstaking job from my friends at JPL and some of the other support organizations, the James Webb Telescope. Now, I know you've heard a lot about it, and if you haven't, you're going to, because it is the most powerful space observatory ever built. And it's going to launch next week. It is an absolute engineering marvel. Will help answer fundamental questions about the universe, peering back in time 13 billion years, because its gold reflector is able to capture that much light. But there's a lot of interesting stuff about this telescope that people may not know, so I'm going to share it with you. I get you. I get your wrecking ball. I'm going to talk about that. I promise. I get your passion. I get your passion. I promise you. It has a 21.5 foot gold concave mirror. Okay. It's made of 18 smaller hexagonal mirrors. They're made from beryllium coated with gold. And it's optimized for reflecting not visible light, infrared light, long wavelength light, as the Doppler effect stretches out the shorter wavelength frequencies that are coming from stars and from explosions and nova from the very beginning of the universe. All that's cool. That's cool to be able to look that far back in time, all the way back 13.5 billion years, tiny, tiny bits of long wave radiation in the infrared band. But the interesting thing is what this will give us spectrographically. And this is something we've guessed at. We have taken little tiny peeks at it with some of the probes that we've put up there and sent out beyond the heliosphere. But this telescope will be able to look through the corona of other suns. And the reason this is important is because when elements are on the other side of that, or on this side of that, those elements absorb that broad spectrum radiation coming from that star. Now, when it absorbs that information, that wavelength, it leaves empty spots in the signal. We call that the absorption spectrum. And we know what every single element in the universe has as its specific set of frequencies. And so we can actually do spectrographic analysis of the matter in space that's between us and those stars, because we can see the portions that have been subtracted. So we'll be able to see things that we've never been able to see before, much further away than before. The mirror and the instruments are protected by a 5-layer sun shield, which is shaped like a kite and is built to unfurl to the size of a tennis court. So its membranes are composed of kapton, which is a material known for its high heat resistance and stability under a wide temperature range, both vital since the sun-facing side of the shield will get as hot as 230 degrees Fahrenheit, while the other side will reach a low of minus 394 Fahrenheit. So the telescope also has a spacecraft bus, and this contains its subsystems for electrical power, all the propulsion, all the communications orientation, the heating, and the data handling. It's going to weigh about as much as a school bus for sure. It's going to go on a 2 million mile journey. It's going to orbit about 2 million miles from Earth, roughly 4 times the distance of our planet from the moon. Unlike Hubble, the current premier space telescope that films things or looks at things in the visible range, it's going to remain directly behind Earth from the point of view of the sun, allowing it to remain in our planet's night side. So it's not going to have the sun to compete with it. It's going to be looking way, way out in space, and it needs that cold envelope in order to do that. Now, it's going to take about a month to reach this region in space, known as the second Lagrange point. We call it L2. There are 5 of them. One of them is between the Earth and the Sun, and the other is on the opposite side of the Earth, relative to its own orbit. And then there's one on the opposite side of the Moon from Earth in its orbit. So in Earth's orbit. So anyway, because the telescope is too large to fit into a rocket's nose cone in its operational configuration, it has to be transported all folded up. And it's going to be like an origami unfolding in space. It's a very complex and challenging task. It's probably the hardest thing to do. Rather than sending men out there 2 million miles away to assemble it, it will unfold and lock itself into place remotely. So about 30 minutes after takeoff, the communications antenna and solar panels are going to supply it with energy. And then comes the unfurling of the sun shield, hitherto folded like an accordion beginning on the 6th day, well after having passed the moon. Its thin membranes will be guided by a complex mechanism involving 400 pulleys and 1,312 feet of cable. During the next week, it's finally come the mirror's turn to open. Once in its final configuration, the instrument will need to cool, and then it'll have to be recalibrated, and the mirrors have to be adjusted very precisely. So it'll take about 6 months, and then the telescope will be ready to go. And what we will see is going to be nothing short of amazing. Of course, it's going to be, the beginning of life. It's going to confirm the advent of the Big Bang. And keep in mind that, at the speed of light, really, the Big Bang never happened. The whole universe is still local. But we are here, and so our observation has slowed the universe down so we can behold it, and that's how we're going to observe it. Astronomers want to see how the very first stars and galaxies were formed and how they evolved over time. Its second major goal is going to be the discovery of, and this is where it really gets exciting, exoplanets, other planets. Planets outside the solar system that may actually be able to support life. Unlike the ultraviolet and visible light Hubble, which we've seen spectacular photographs since that has been put up, this is going to operate in the infrared, much longer wavelengths, not visible to the human eye, but it's still going to produce images, and we're still going to be able to see things with it. It's just going to be in a different wavelength of light. Of course, it's been decades in the making. Lots of PhDs have been granted in the building of this thing. The launch has been pushed back a lot of times. It was supposed to happen in 2007, then it was going to happen in 2018, and the observatory is the result of immense international collaboration, including Russian, and integrates Canadian and European instruments. More than 10,000 people worked on this project, and the budget, it went over budget. It's about $10 billion. So it's a pretty expensive thing. But that only covers about 3 months budget of the operating of the CDC. So it's okay in my book. And by the way, that's $50 billion per year the CDC costs us. $50 billion per year. Yeah. All right. Let's see. I think it's about time we say goodbye to YouTube. I hate to bring it up on you like that, but gosh, we have so much good stuff to go over, and I just don't want to be censored. And I'm so sorry. We have 20,000 people out there that access our YouTubes, and we appreciate you. We love you. But you have to understand, YouTube is dying. It's going away. It's no longer the free speech platform it was. It is now a violator of constitutional free speech rights. And so we cannot abide. We just can't abide. So if you're listening on YouTube right now, I'm just looking out there. There are a lot of you out there listening on YouTube. My apologies. But you're going to have to go to one of the other free speech platforms. And if you look right down here in the description, right down there in YouTube, just open it up right there. Yep, right there. Any one of those free speech platforms will work. Rumble, Rockfin, Twitch, DLive, they're all good. They all are good. Okay, so that's just what's going to happen to YouTube. So we're going to have to say goodbye to YouTube. We're getting ready to venture into an area that only Americans are allowed to listen to. And since you're not, well, that's the way it goes.